Okay, good evening, everybody. My name is Jim Ostrowski, and I work in Eagle's Environmental Support Division, and I welcome you to our meeting tonight on the South Macomb Disposal Authority landfills 9A and 9 and 9A. I'm glad you could join us tonight. We've got about 14 people logged in right now, and I expect we'll get several more start to come on as people start to finish up dinner and stuff. So if you want, next slide, please. Okay, so I'm just going to go over some housekeeping guidelines and then I'll turn it over to Abby. First of all, you all notice that the lines are muted. It means you can hear us, but we can't hear you. A little later on, we'll talk about how to unmute lines. You can ask your questions if you'd like. We are recording this webinar, and like with all the public meetings that we host, we post them all on the YouTube channel, on our YouTube channel, and that'll probably be in the next few days. Most likely by Friday, we'll have it up there and available for you to look at. Next. When we do get to questions and answers after our presentation, a couple different ways you can ask your question. You can type your question into the question box that's on your Zoom toolbar. Go ahead and type that in and we will go through those after the presentation. Also, you can click the raise hand icon, and that means that maybe you want to voice your question. So if you want to actually ask your question, we'll unmute your line if you have your hand raised, and you'll be able to ask your question. It doesn't look like we have anybody listening in just on the phone, but if you're on the phone, you just hit #2 and that'll raise your hand so you can ask a question that way. And that's all I have, so I'll turn it over to Abby Hendershot. Abby, go ahead. You're muted, Abby.
There we go. Okay, thank you, Jim. I appreciate it. Welcome, everybody. I am Abigail Hendershot, Executive Director of the Michigan Pfas Action Response Team. Happy to be with you tonight and share this information about the South Macomb Disposal Authority landfills 9 and 9A. And we've got plenty of time for questions and answers. As Jim said, feel free to drop your questions into the question and answer box and we'll get to them at the end. I'm just going to go through a couple of quick things and welcome you in. We do have a full team here today to help go through the agenda and through all the investigation that has been done so far. So MPART overview is actually going to be done by Tracy Cascametti, our regional lead for PFAS in the Southeast Michigan office. Our health overview is going to be done by Rosa Hyman, who's our toxicologist for this site with the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. And then Melissa Power Taylor is our project manager, and she is in Eagle in the Superfund section. So, and then of course, Tracy's going to come back and guide you through the website. We'll get to the questions and answers at the end. But like I said, feel free to type things as you go and hear things, and this will be recorded. So I'm going to turn it over to Tracy. She's going to guide you through this first part, but I appreciate you being here tonight. Thanks.
All right, good evening, everyone, and thank you, Abby. So my name is Tracy Cascametti. I'm out of the local Eagle office. Again, Eagle is the Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. You'll hear us use some of these acronyms like EAGLE or MPART. MPART's the Michigan PFAS Action Response Team. But I'm out of our local office, which is in Warren, and we cover the Southeast Michigan area, Macomb, Oakland, St. Clair, and Wayne counties. So I'm going to take you through an overview of how our structure works and how we're managing PFAS in Michigan. MPART was formed under an executive order, originally under Governor Snyder and continued under Governor Whitmer. And it's really a communication structure, and it's an organization to bring different state agencies together. So this is not just a function of Eagle or the Department of Health and Human Services. It's really a way for all the state agencies that have a stake in PFAS issues to work together. It's also a way that we coordinate with federal and local government on different programs and projects and local issues as well. And really, we think that this communication structure we have across these different state agencies is the reason we've been so successful in Michigan at rapidly identifying PFAS exposures and using a data-driven approach to make our decisions. So let's talk about, some of the vocabulary or lingo we're going to use tonight. So when we say PFAS, PFAS, we're talking about per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. When we say PFAS, we're talking about a family of chemicals or a whole class of man-made chemicals. Later in the presentation, when Melissa starts talking about site-specific information, she might talk about individual compounds. So you might hear her say PFOA, PFOA, or PFOS, PFOS. But when we say PFAS, we're talking generally about a family of chemicals. And it's a huge family of man-made chemicals, over 5,000 compounds that have some chemical similarities and some differences. But the thing that makes them a family is this strong carbon-fluorine bond. That's one of their sort of trademark similarities, right? And these are man-made chemicals that were used as surfactants and detergents and a range of industrial and commercial applications. And they're for the most part, they're all highly stable. They repel water, oil, and grease. We've been using this chemistry for about 80 years. And again, it's, over 5,000 different chemicals, but we're really, when we are doing our investigations, we're only looking at a couple dozen that we have testing criteria and environmental criteria for. So I like this slide. It kind of goes through some of these different commercial and industrial applications. Again, this was sort of seen as a miracle chemistry, and we then started using it across all different sorts of applications. And so one that you might be most familiar with is apparel and textiles. PFAS is the compounds that make your waterproof fabrics waterproof and your stain resistant carpets stain resistant. It's the stuff that makes your pans non-stick. It's also the chemistry that helps us fight jet fuel fires and hydrocarbon fires. And so the uses of these compounds was widespread across many sectors, and that's part of what led to the widespread occurrence of this in the environment. So what is the concern with PFAS, right? So like I said, it's widespread in the environment because of all the different uses for it. And the sort of miracle chemistry of that carbon-fluorine bond makes it hard to get rid of. It's really these compounds don't break down easily. They don't biodegrade. And in fact, some of them bioaccumulate. They build up in our bodies or in the tissues of fish or wildlife. And some of them may affect health. And Rosa from Department of Health and Human Services is going to come on after me and talk about the health implications of PFAS exposure. But with 5,000 of these chemicals, there's a lot we still don't know. So there's a lack of information about many of these chemicals, and we don't have national standards. And so you notice the M&M part is the Michigan PFAS Action Response Team, and this is what we are doing at a statewide level, but we don't have federal criteria for, under the Safe Drinking Water Act or under the Clean Water Act. And so the states are left to figure a lot of this out for themselves. So this is a busy slide, I know, but I really like it because it demonstrates a couple of things: how PFAS is cycling through the environment and also the places that we're looking for it. And so if you start in that upper left at sort of our generic factory, right? This place might be producing, nonstick widgets or something, right? But there's potential sources of PFAS at either the site where PFAS compounds are being manufactured or being used, right? Maybe some other, maybe it's a paper mill, or maybe it's, a plating shop or something. And then maybe there's a groundwater release, maybe from bad housekeeping or a permitted discharge to the ground over years. That industry may have had a permitted discharge to the wastewater treatment plant or unpermitted discharges through the wastewater treatment plant. And some of these facilities have permits to directly discharge into rivers. And so PFAS compounds can leave a factory in stormwater runoff or industrial discharges and get into the environment. If they get over into the wastewater treatment plant, our municipal wastewater treatment plants are not designed to remove PFAS compounds. And so those chemicals can pass through into the effluent and go out into the river, or they can build up in the sludge in the wastewater treatment plant. Those sludges are land applied, sometimes as biosolids, or often they go as sludge into the landfill. And then we start this cycle again, right? Because the landfill produces a leachate that might be discharged back into that wastewater treatment plant. And so we have this cycle where we're just moving these compounds around the environment. As you move over to the right of the slide, you'll see, some more of this places where people can be exposed to PFAS. And so biosolids that are applied to farm fields may lead to infiltration into the groundwater or uptake into plants. You may have residential homes in the area that are using groundwater as their source of drinking water, or you might have a municipal well system. So there's a potential route of exposure from contaminated groundwater or contaminated surface water. The other thing you see down sort of toward the bottom of the infographic there is firefighting foam, right? So if a fire was put out or fire training was done in an area, that's a potential for groundwater exposure as well. So this infographic really shows us how PFAS moves around the environment, but it also shows the places where we're looking for PFAS, right? Where we can intercept PFAS and try to identify its occurrence. And so Eagle is working with, state and local partners to do a lot of this sampling, but we're looking systematically in a lot of these places. So we're having landfills sample their leachate. We're having industry sample their discharge to the wastewater treatment plant. We're having wastewater treatment plants sample their discharge into the river. We're sampling water treatment plants that are providing municipal water. And certainly in any area where we are aware of groundwater contamination, the first thing we do is pick up the phone and call the local health department and identify who has wells in the area to see if they could potentially be impacted from this contamination. Next slide. So just a little bit about the surface water investigations that we're doing. Eagle samples surface waters all across the state of Michigan. Even before we were looking at PFAS, we do what we call ambient water quality surveys, where we're just getting a baseline for what is water quality across Michigan. And we've started adding PFAS to these investigations or to these surveys. And so this helps us understand the occurrence of PFAS in the natural environment. We're also collecting fish samples when we do this. And in some instances, it has led us to sources of contamination. If we're finding elevated sources or elevated levels of PFAS in a lake or stream, we can do a source investigation, and has brought us to sources of PFAS that we might not have found otherwise. So when we're doing these surveys and we're sampling for PFAS, we have to, compare it to relevant criteria. Like I said, we don't have national standards, and so Michigan has developed its own standards. So under our drinking water program, we do have enforceable regulatory numbers that providers of water treatment or of treated water have to meet, just like any other criteria that our drinking water has to meet. There's 7 compounds listed here that we have statewide criteria for. And these are the same numbers we would use to evaluate samples that are taken from residential wells to see if they're meeting health-based drinking water numbers. Next slide, please. And so it's a different chart, but you might notice these are the same numbers. So when we're doing a groundwater investigation at a potential site of investigation or a potential site of contamination, if we find PFAS in the groundwater, we're comparing it to these same numbers. And if the groundwater exceeds these numbers, we consider that a site of PFAS contamination. And these are, again, regulatory numbers that a responsible party has to take action if their groundwater exceeds these numbers. We've also developed surface water criteria as well. So when those aquatic biologists are out sampling surface water, we have criteria for a couple of these compounds that we use to compare surface water samples to decide if we need to take further action. So this map shows you every purple dot is a site across the state where the groundwater exceeds those cleanup numbers that were just on the screen. So these are what we consider sites of PFAS contamination. I think right now we have 168 of these sites. These are landfills and military installations and airports and industrial sites and old dumps. And, we have honestly more sites of known PFAS contamination in Michigan than any other state. But I just want to be clear that, this is not because anything was done differently in Michigan. This wasn't because we disposed of things differently or used chemicals differently. We have more sites of contamination because we are looking for sites of contamination. Like I said, there's no national standard, there's no national mandate for state programs to be looking for PFAS in our through our different regulatory programs, but because we're looking for it, we are finding it. And because we are comprehensively looking and finding it, we're able to identify the places where people may be exposed to PFAS and then control those exposures, with our health partners. And, I think right now we have 168 sites. There are hundreds of potential sites out there. And so when we think about what other sites might be contaminated with PFAS, or when we come across sites that might be contaminated with PFAS, we have to prioritize those based on potential exposure, right? Based on how people might be harmed by this contamination. And the driver for all of that is protecting drinking water. Rose is going to get into this more, but the route of concern for PFAS is ingestion. So either contaminated water or contaminated fish. And so those are really the drivers for how we're choosing the sites that we're working on. And then lastly, I think for me, I just want to touch on another part of the Michigan PFAS Action Response Team, which is our Citizens Advisory Work Group. This is a work group comprised of residents from impacted communities. And so if you have site of PFAS contamination in your community, and this is something that you're concerned with and something you want to be more involved in, you can join the Citizens Advisory Work Group. Anyone who's interested in becoming a member just has to submit a registration form that's found on our website, and you are a welcomed member into the Citizens Advisory Work Group. And really this group is charged with two things. Recommending to MPART how we can better engage and empower communities, and then recommending to MPART how we educate the general public. We've been on, a couple-year journey here of bringing this information into communities, and we've learned a lot about the kind of information we need to bring to people and when we need to bring information to people, and that's part of what the Citizens Advisory Work Group is helping us with. So now I'm going to turn this over to Rosa Hyman. She's a toxicologist from the Department of Health and Human Services, and she's going to talk about PFAS and health.
Thank you, Tracy.
Yeah.
So my name is Rosa Hyman. Like Tracy said, I work in the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. Here you will see my contact information, my phone number, my email. If you have any questions, feel free to send me an email or a phone call. Next one, please. So first, I'm going to talk about the role of Ndhs and the local health department. So our role is to understand the health concern that the community is facing. And for that, we develop a plan to investigate and address the health risk. In this plan, EGLE leads the site investigation, and Ndhs and the local health department leads the public health planning and response. We also evaluate PFAS exposure to residents in the community, in where we recommend public health actions as needed. Next one, please. So how people can be exposed to PFAS? So the main way in which a person can be exposed to PFAS is by swallowing the PFAS or ingesting the PFAS. For example, by drinking contaminated water or by eating fish caught from water contaminated by PFAS. So once we know that there are PFAS, especially PFOS, because we know PFOS can bioaccumulate in fish, in rivers and in lakes, we sample the fish from those rivers and lakes. And if we found PFOS in the fish, we issue something that is called Eat Safe Fish Guidelines for those specific rivers and lakes. Also, another way in which a person can be exposed to PFAS is by incidental swallowing of contaminated soil or dust. And we may see this more in children because of the hand-to-mouth behavior. Also, by eating food packaging material containing PFAS and by using some consumer products. It's important to say that PFAS absorption through the skin is typically not a concern, so you can keep using the water for cleaning your house, cleaning the dishes, or to showering. Next one, please. So most people in the United States have some levels of PFAS in their blood. Here we see a study done by Ndhs. In this study, they studied these 4 different PFAS. They studied PFOS, PFOA, PFHXS, and PFNA. And what we see here is the results. In the y-axis, we see the average of PFAS in the blood. In the x-axis, we see different years. So what we see here is that there is a decrease of PFAS over time, especially PFOS and PFOA. So for PFOS, we have a decrease of around 80%, and for PFOA, a decrease of around 60%. And the reason of this decrease is because around 2002, industry that produced these two chemicals reduced the production of PFOS and PFOA. So when you have less production of these contaminants, people are going to be less exposed. Therefore, less absorption of these contaminants in their blood. Next one, please. So PFAS have been associated with some health effects, and those health effects are reduced fertility, high blood pressure or preeclampsia in pregnant women, a small decrease in infant birth weight, high cholesterol, especially total cholesterol and LDL cholesterol. And this one, the LDL cholesterol, is also known as bad cholesterol. Next one, please. The other health effects that have been associated with PFAS has, for example, thyroid disease, liver damage, decreased immune system response to vaccines, developing certain type of cancer, in particular kidney and testicular cancer. And we see this especially with PFOA. It's important to know if you have been exposed to PFAS, that not necessarily mean that you're going to develop health effects immediately. Usually people need to be exposed to high levels of PFAS for a long period of time to be more likely than the average person to develop health effects in the future. Next one, please. So for us to make our public health recommendation, there are certain factors that we consider. And those factors are the NDHS comparison values, the residential well results, and we evaluate those ones individually and collectively, and the site-specific information, for example, the source and the geology. Next one, please. So what is the NDHS comparison value? So the NDHS comparison value is the lowest value of the NDHS public health drinking water screening level and the MPAR health-based value, also known as MCL. But it's important to know that both of them are set to protect everyone, including those ones that are more at risk, like fetuses and breastfeed babies. Next one, please. So here we see the NDHS comparison values. So we see that PFOS is 8 part per trillion, PFOA is 8 part per trillion, PFNA is 6 part per trillion, PFHXS is 51 part per trillion, PFBS is 420 part per trillion, PFHXA is 400,000 part per trillion, and Gen X is 370 part per trillion. Next one, please. So we also, for us to make our health recommendation, we evaluate your results, and we do that individually and collectively. So individually, once we receive your result, we compare those one with the Michigan comparison values. In here, we see that the blue houses were non-detect, and we see that the yellow houses, once we compare those houses individually with the Michigan comparison values, those ones have lower levels in comparison with the Michigan comparison values. Then the red ones, those ones were when they were compared individually with the Michigan comparison values, they have exceedances. So also we evaluate the result collectively. In the first example, we see the yellow house, the one that have lower levels of PFAS, surround of houses that are blue. So those ones are not detected. So what we can say about the first example is that we may not have a high source of PFAS in the area. However, if we see the second example, we now see a yellow house, a house with low levels of PFAS, surround with houses that are red. That means surround houses that have exceedances of PFAS. That also tells us something. That tells us that they may be a high source of PFAS in the area. And because we don't know if PFAS level may fluctuate over time, for this yellow house, we may take a more preventive approach and provide this house with a filtered water or alternative source of water. Next one, please. Other things that we take into consideration for us to make our public health recommendation is the site-specific information. For example, the source. Do we know the source of the contamination? Is because of landfill or because their use of AFFF? Also the geology. Is your well located in clay or is your well located in sand? How deep is your well? Is a shallow well or is a deep well? And also we consider the plume. Is your house located in the plume of the contamination? Next one, please. So once we evaluate all these factors, we make our public health recommendation. And that public health recommendation can be, first, no public health action necessary, or second, we may recommend a filter or alternative source of water. And the reason we may recommend a filter is because maybe we need more time to understand the contamination, or because we want to protect the residents. We don't know if levels of PFAS may fluctuate over time, like the yellow house in the second example. Or third, we may provide education. We may provide information of PFAS in drinking water. So that's everything for me. Thank you. And now I will let you with Melissa. Next one, please. Thank you.
Okay, hello everybody. I'm Melissa Powers Taylor. I'm the site project manager with Eagle's Remediation and Redevelopment Division Superfund section. On the screen right now is my contact information. If you end up having questions later on, feel free to send me an email or give me a call and I'd be happy to talk through any questions you may have. So we're going to start out with just a really brief history of the South Macomb Disposal Authority Landfills 9 and 9A site. So the SMDA Landfills 9 and 9A Superfund site is made up of 2 adjacent municipal waste landfills. The landfills operated from 1968 to 1975. The landfills were not adequately covered or lined to prevent groundwater contamination. The local groundwater near the landfills has been contaminated with landfill leachate. Leachate is a liquid that forms when rainwater filters through the waste placed in the landfill. Eagle requested that the SMDA sample their groundwater wells for PFAS because PFAS was detected in their on-site groundwater and leachate collection system. Since that request, the SMDA has performed 2 rounds of groundwater sampling for PFAS in 2020, with a 3rd round coming up next month in June. This map shows the location of the SMDA 9 and 9A site outlined in red, just south of 24 Mile Road and to the west of Card Road in Macomb Township. The landfill currently has a groundwater and leachate collection system to help control contamination from leaving the site. Additionally, as shown to the north with this dashed line, there is an underground engineered feature that controls the flow of groundwater from leaving the site called a slurry wall. The groundwater flow to the northeast of the site, north of 24 Mile Road, is to the northeast. The groundwater flow from northwest of the site and from on-site tends to flow to the south. The red pins on the map show the 8 locations where PFOA and 2 locations where PFOS were detected in groundwater during those 2 events above their maximum, above the groundwater criteria. The highest concentration of PFOA detected in groundwater was 53 parts per trillion at monitoring well 103 at the location circled here on the west side of the eastern landfill. The highest concentration of PFOS detected in groundwater was 66 parts per trillion at monitoring well 113 at the circled location here on the northern side of the western landfill. An unconfirmed exceedance of PFOS was detected during the second round of sampling in 2020 at monitoring well 007 shown here at the northeast corner of landfill 9, or the eastern landfill. This location will be resampled next month in June. The yellow pins on the map show the locations where PFAS compounds were detected below the groundwater criteria. And the green pins show the locations where no PFAS compounds were detected. We'll talk about the surface water that was sampled on the next slide. So 3 surface water samples were collected from the McBride drain, which is to the west and south of the site, in June of 2020 and analyzed for PFAS. An upstream sample was collected near 24 Mile Road, and 2 samples were collected downstream of the site, one from just south of the site and another one from about halfway between the site and 23 Mile Road. All of these samples were well below the surface water criteria for PFOA of 12,000 parts per trillion. The Macomb County Health Department has identified 9 residential wells near SMDA 9 and 9A. The SMDA has agreed to sample those 9 wells with the permission of the well owners. 6 of those 9 wells are currently part of a long-term monitoring program carried out by Eagle and the Macomb County Health Department. And those wells are monitored for landfill contaminants, which for contaminants that may be associated with the landfill. All of the residential wells in the area of the landfill were part of this monitoring program dating back to the 1980s to ensure that their water was safe to drink. As wells were hooked up to municipal water, they were removed from the program. Homes were hooked up to municipal water for a variety of reasons, such as the preference of the homeowner, and in some cases because the houses were very close to the landfill and had contamination from the landfill, making them unsafe to drink. The wells remaining in the program have not been hooked up to municipal water, and the wells have not had detections of landfill contamination that would trigger the need for them to be hooked up to municipal water. Even though those 6 wells have not had detections of other contaminants from the landfill, the SMDA, Eagle, and the health departments would still like to sample those wells out of an abundance of caution. The map shown here shows the relative areas where the known residential wells exist. These areas are highlighted in purple along 23 Mile Road to the south, Pfas Road and Card Road to the north, and 24 Mile Road to the east. Eagle mailed letters to affected residents on April 29th of 2021, and the SMDA mailed letters on May 5th of 2021. These letters explained that the resident's well was identified near the landfill and that the SMDA would like to sample the well at the request of Eagle for PFAS out of an abundance of caution. The SMDA would like to sample the wells the week of June 21st, 2021. The sampling will be performed by the SMDA and one of their consulting firms. Sampling can be performed at an outdoor spigot if one is available. However, if one is not available, samples can be collected from the sink inside of the kitchen sink inside of the home. Sample analysis is performed by a certified laboratory and results are usually ready within about 4 to 6 weeks. The homeowners and occupants are provided with a copy of the test results. MDHHS works with the local health department on the health response depending on the results. So next, we're going to show you the MPART website. So you can get to the MPART website directly by going to michigan.gov/PFAS response, or by searching Michigan MPART in your Google web browser. So once you're at the site, you can go to popular pages and then go to PFAS sites. Once on the PFAS sites page, this page shows a list of all of the PFAS sites, but we're going to do a search for South Macomb. So this will show all of the sites with that name, and we're going to go to the Landfills 9 and 9A site in Macomb Township. So here you'll find updated information about the site, recent accomplishments, next steps, and about test results, and the historical timeline of events that have happened at the site. Additionally, on this site, you can find my contact information so that you can contact me with any questions that you may have. And I'll turn it back over so that we can answer any questions anyone may have. Thanks, Jim.
All right, thanks, Melissa. Just want to remind people that in the chat, I put a lot of those links that Melissa referred to, as well as Tracy and Rosa referred to in their presentations. So you can open up the chat and check those out and go there directly if you want to. Right now, we're going to take questions and answers. So if you have a question, you can type it into the question box on your GoToWebinar toolbar. You can also click the raise hand icon on your toolbar, and we will unmute your mic so you can ask your question. And it doesn't look like we have anybody on the phone, so I don't need to explain that. We don't have any questions in the question box right now, so I'm going to give it a minute or two to see if anybody else, if anybody wants to chime in with a question. That's what we're here for, to answer those. I didn't know if while we're waiting for questions, if Abby or Tracy or anybody on the team here wanted to, I don't know, talk any more about anything.
Yeah, Jim, you know, the one thing I would add, and Melissa, thanks for taking us through that tour of the website. That was, you know, how to get to information specific to SMDA. But there's a lot of other information on the MPART website. And I talked briefly about the sampling being done at water treatment plants, you know, municipal water treatment plants. You know, part of the reason we're here tonight is to talk about, you know, residential well sampling that we want to do around the 9 and 9A site. But, you know, a lot of the residents in that area and across Macomb County are on municipal water, right? Brought to you by the Great Lakes Water Authority. And so under the new PFAS standards in Michigan, all of our water treatment plants have to sample for PFAS. All of that data is on our website here. Just as a general overview, there's information on our website about the couple of water plants across the state where we have found PFAS and it has led us to an issue. But overall, we are not finding PFAS at levels of concern in our water plants, particularly in the Great Lakes Water Authority. There has never been any detection throughout any of those intakes or any of that system of PFAS above levels of concern. So that's another thing you can check out on this website. Maybe you have a cabin up north, or, you know, family in another part of the state, and you're wondering about, you know, these sites in their area. You can look at the water plant sampling. You can look at sites across the state. There's an interactive map viewer, so you can check out what's going on all across the state from this website.
Okay. We're not seeing any questions, so I mean that's fine. We can wrap it up, I guess. So I don't know, Tracy or Melissa, Rosa, do you have any comments or anything? And I will put, while you guys are talking, I'll put the, Melissa, I'll put your contact information in the chat too, so people have it. So go ahead.
I don't have any additional comments. Thanks to Melissa for all the good site-specific information, and thanks to everyone that joined us. I did notice, looking at the list of attendees, it's mostly folks we know, right, from local government and from SMDA and their consultants. And so I would just encourage all of you, if you are in contact with residents, that received your letter asking to do the well sampling, or you're otherwise, maybe people call the local health department or they call the local government office, please direct them to these resources. Please direct them to this website, to Melissa, if they've got questions about the landfill. I mean, I know her and her group have a long relationship with that community over work at this landfill. So, please reach out and share these resources with your residents and direct them to us or, our health partners if they have any questions at all.
And also they can be directed to our YouTube channel to view a recording of this wonderful webinar.
Right.
If they were wanting to view it and unable to tonight.
Yep. Well, we'll get that posted hopefully by Friday, so you can share it at that point. If you want to look up if you look up Eagle YouTube, you'll find it under videos, along with all the other recordings of public meetings and all the other videos that we have available. So I want to thank everybody who joined us tonight for taking some time out of your evening to learn about this site investigation. And thank you for our team here from MPART, Eagle, and Department of Health and Human Services. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your evening.
Thanks all. Good night.
Thank you.